Welcome back to The Fix. I'm Karima Brown. Now, in his budget vote speech, Justice Minister Ronald Lamola promised sweeping reforms aimed at making justice more accessible and responsive to women, young people and working class people. He also pledged support for the anti-corruption efforts of the state and strengthening of the NPA. Well, to take us through their plans is the Deputy Justice Minister, Mr. John Jeffrey. Mr. Jeffrey, thank you so much for joining us from our Durban studio. Let's start with the NPA, because you've sent out a statement to clarify what a lot of people found problematic in the budget vote speech, and that is donor funding for the National Prosecuting Authority. Just tell us exactly what the department's position is and the ministry's position is. Today in the City Press, for example, there's a piece that says if the NPA gets donor funding, then it is beholden to outside forces. And obviously, that is not the aim of the ministry at all. So if you could just clarify the statement that you released on the 18th around donor funding for the National Prosecuting Authority, please.
Morning, Karima, and thanks for having me. Look, the issue is obviously the budget is tight. And the question was, or the issue was raised really as a question relating to donor funding for the NPA. The crucial aspect is obviously that the NPA must be independent and must take its decisions independently, can't be influenced by anyone in the decisions that are taken as to who to prosecute, how to prosecute, those kinds of things. And if there is funding, then that should be done in such a way that it doesn't impact on the decisions of the NPA, the independence of the NPA. But let me also say up front is that the NPA has been receiving some funding, as was put out in the Justice Statement. The Tutuzela care centres, for example, which are one-stop shops at or places attached to clinics or hospitals, those have been donor funded. They are basically there for victims, survivors of rape and other forms of sexual offences. Nobody's raised, and nobody would, I think, raise that, oh, well, that compromises the independence of the NPA. So it's a question of really, given a tight fiscus, how can we ensure that more gets done? Department of Justice also does receive donor funding for other projects, but obviously it's not the same as for the NPA and the issue of prosecutorial independence. Now,
in this budget vote speech, the minister did speak about capacitating the NPA, not just in terms of money, but also skills and access. Tell us, how many vacant posts are there in the NPA, and how soon are you able to get money to fill those posts, particularly in outlying areas, if one looks at the ability of people to get access to justice?
Yeah, look, basically in the public service, posts get frozen when they get vacated, when somebody leaves or resigns or whatever. And that's been happening with the NPA, so has been a large number of vacant posts. Basically, a decision has been taken to, in particular, fill the posts of prosecutors in areas where there are not prosecutors, where people had to previously come in from outside to service those areas. And so that is happening. The aspirant prosecutor program, which basically takes in people who want to be prosecutors and trains them, that is being revived. Mm-hmm. So those are some of the things happening at the moment. I don't have the exact figures of the number of vacancies and the numbers that are going to be filled immediately.
Talking about numbers, if we shift to gender-based violence and sexual offences, it was also a big part of the focus of the budget vote speech. And in it, the minister said that there are 92 sexual offences courts that are operating in the country. Now, if one considers the size of our population, 92 sexual offences courts is simply not enough. You are planning to roll out more. Can you tell us exactly how many more you are going to be rolling out and where you're going to get the money from to do this?
Yeah, let me just explain what the sexual offences courts are. We've got 3 levels of courts. We've got magistrates, district courts, we've got regional courts, also magistrates courts, and then we've got the high courts. The sexual offences courts are sort of different revamped courts at the regional level where most of the sexual offences matters are heard. And they're basically improved facilities, as it were. There's a separate room that the witness, the victim, survivor can testify in, so she doesn't have to be in the same space as the accused. So she would sit in that room, give her evidence, be cross-examined from that room. It would be relayed into the court by a closed-circuit TV. Then you have intermediaries, so if the witness is a child, an intermediary will take the questions and rephrase them for that child. You've also got additional facilities of court preparation officers and so on. Some of those facilities, so there's a sort of list of what is a sexual offences court, and that's the 90-odd that the Minister was speaking about. However, some of those facilities are available in other regional courts. For example, the intermediaries, the closed-circuit TVs, so people don't have to testify in the same space. So, but the whole idea of the sexual offences court is to make giving evidence less painful for the witness.
Yes.
And there is some money in the budget for increasing the number of sexual offences courts. But obviously it's an ongoing process. We started, yeah.
I want to come specifically to the fact that the Minister admitted that we've got one of the highest femicide rates in the world. And if you consider that vis-a-vis the 92 sexual offences courts that do the specific work that you've outlined, and elements of that being in other courts as well, it's clearly inadequate. What I'm asking for is your practical layout for making sure that victims of sexual abuse and survivors of gender-based violence will have a court system that will, in fact, hear them, not re-victimize them, and will have trained personnel to actually make sure that the justice system works for them.
Sure, but what I'm saying is that the number's increasing. I don't have the exact number of regional courts, but it's, as you've said, it's 90-odd sexual offences courts. Even courts that are not officially designated as sexual offences courts do have those facilities, many of them as well. Obviously, we need to keep rolling it out and ensure better access, and we also need to focus on the functioning of those courts, that witnesses, victims, survivors get the service that is expected from us at those courts.
Okay, now in the
femicide is a little bit different. Sorry?
I was going to talk about the Tutuzela centres, which are the centres that are attached to a lot of these facilities. Now, a few weeks ago, I spoke with the head of Becky Sisa, which is the health journalism unit of the Mail and Guardian, as well as Lisa Vetten, and they were saying that, for example, social development literally is not using their budgets to take care of this service that is provided. What is the inter-ministerial cooperation that you are going to put in place to make sure that all departments, cross-sections of ministries actually come out and make sure that the services that government provides as a whole is comprehensive, and that, you know, the issue doesn't get played like a football and people kind of, you know, pass the buck around?
Sure. Look, there is in terms of the Sexual Offences Act, there is a statutory, and statutory being set out in law, there is a statutory committee which is chaired by the Director General of the Department of Justice with senior officials from other departments, the police, social development, health, etc., which is meant to meet regularly to look at the implementation of the Sexual Offences Act. There's a similar structure for the Child Justice Act. So I also read about that. I've asked for more detail on exactly what the situation is regarding social workers at the Thuthuzela care centres. But there is that structure which should have picked up there was a problem and needs to work on it. But there is a statutory structure forcing different departments to work together on the matter.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, Deputy Minister, we also heard about the amount of money that is being spent on commissions of inquiry. And, of course, the Justice Department and Ministry provides infrastructure for all of this. Give us a ballpark figure of what is the amount that is being spent on commissions of inquiry at the moment. And more importantly, how are you going to ensure that the work of these commissions of inquiry is in fact capacitated, given that there's so many of them sitting? I mean, we've had Nugent, we have the PIC, we have the Zondo Commission of Inquiry, and several others. How are you financing them? How big a chunk of it is it taking out of your budget?
Yeah, look, Karina, unfortunately I don't have the exact figures for the different commissions, but they are available. I think they were given in particular to the Justice Portfolio Committee. Look, we have had in the past other commissions. We had a commission on Marikana. We had a commission on higher education. And we've then got the current one. Some of them have finished. So, for example, the commission, the Nugent Commission, has completed its work. They've reported. The PIC Commission were meant to complete, but they've asked for an extension. The Zondo Commission was given by the former Public Protector particularly quite a tight time period to complete their work. They've asked for an extension on that as well. So it's very much up to those commissions to indicate how they're going to do the work, and obviously when there is an extension, that means more money has to be spent on them.
Let me go through the amounts that are in the budget vote speech. So we've got 1.958 billion, which is going to Legal Aid South Africa. We've got 31.4 million to the Office of the Public Protector, then 363 million to the Special Investigating Unit, 189.2 million to the South African Human Rights Commission, and 2.384 billion as a direct charge to the National Revenue Fund in respect of magistrates' salaries. And then in the 2019-2020 budget allocation, the 7% mainly due, the increase, the year-on-year increase, which amounts to 7%, is mainly due to an amount of 272 million rand specifically allocated to the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture. So those are quite large chunks. And if one looks at, for example, the SIU, I mean, they are involved in investigations from the SABC to municipalities. Are you satisfied that your allocation is going to allow you to revamp, modernize, and make justice accessible for people? Are you going to be sitting with Treasury and negotiating in different ways for specific programs that you've prioritized?
Yeah, look, most of those figures that you read out, which is, I think, from the Vote 5 or the fifth section of the budget, are disbursements basically just going through the Justice Department. And it's largely those bodies that go to Treasury and negotiate around how much money they should get. So that would be Legal Aid South Africa, the Human Rights Commission, Public Protector, and so on. But so that money just comes through the department and goes directly to those entities. SIU as well. SIU does recover some of the money from the bodies that they are investigating, so they are able to recover that. But yes, I mean, there's never. We do need a lot more funding in terms of modernizing the courts. The minister spoke about. The digitalization of the courts and making greater use of technology on the courts, and obviously all of that costs money. And the trick is to do as much as we can with what we've got, obviously hoping that we will always get more. Okay. But the key issue is to be as cost effective as possible.
On this modernization, obviously, I mean, the buzzword around is the fourth industrial revolution. One would hope that the Justice Department would make, you know, a lot of the information, digitize it, make it easier to file, make it accessible, and so on. What exactly will the modernization process comprise? But more importantly, are you going to outsource this process, or are you going to, you know, allow the department to do it? We've seen in some instances when programs like this do come up, the tender processes often gets messed around with, and instead of the system being modernized, you often have an institution that gets hollowed out, as was the case in SARS under state capture. What are the key elements that are a must have in terms of modernization, and how is it going to be handled? Are you going to outsource that process?
Look, the work has been going on for some time. It would involve, and that's so there's a project called the Integrated Criminal Justice System. A part of that is also linkages, computer linkages between different government departments, the police, obviously, justice, correctional services, home affairs, for example. So that work has been going on for some time, and there are some results in terms of that integration. And obviously that would continue. It is important that the prosecutors are able to have, and police officials, immediate knowledge just about of if a person has been arrested, when it comes up when that person applies for bail, has that person been arrested, or are they being charged with other offences in other courts? That information needs to be known up front, because it obviously will impact on the bail. So look, in short, it is a program that has been going on for some time. It does involve, obviously, bringing in technology, and those specifications are set out in the tender bids. And it's something that needs to continue and needs to speed up.
As a final question, Deputy Minister, how much is it going to cost?
I don't have I'm afraid I don't have the budget figures in front of me.
All right.
But obviously this is not cheap.
Okay, thank you so very much. That is, of course, Deputy Justice Minister John Jeffries speaking to us. Still ahead on The Fix, we speak to a panel of journalists about the big stories coming up in the week ahead, and, of course, what's made headlines in the Sunday papers.